India, the world's fourth largest economy. You must have heard this. But still, why is there a power crisis in India even today? Why do crores of people still live in darkness? I, Kusal, will tell you the whole game behind India's power crisis. T&D losses, coal problem.
एंड तक जरूर देखो, वरना अगली बार ऐसा इंफॉर्मेशन मिस हो जाएगा। चलिए शुरू करते हैं।
Let's talk about the reality first. India is the world's fourth largest economy, but the power crisis still continues.
In 2018, the government claimed that 100% of villages have been electrified. But even today, millions of
Question is, what exactly is the problem? If we are generating power and we already have infrastructure, then why isn't electricity reaching everywhere? जवाब तीन बड़ी समस्याओं में छिपा है। एक पे T&D losses, दो पे coal output problem, तीन पे outdated grid infrastructure. Let's understand these problems one by one in detail. The first and biggest problem is T&D losses, meaning Look friends, in India T&D losses are around 15 to 16%. That means if 100 units of power, 85 units reach the consumers and 15 units vanish in between. Now you will ask, how much is it in China, right? In China, it's only 2%. Just imagine, Srif, in India, it's 15 to 16%, while in China, it's only 2%. These are so huge that India loses 2% of its GDP every year. 2% of GDP means lakhs of crores of rupees wasted.
Firstly, natural losses during transportation. When power is generated, it needs to be stepped up for transmission and then stepped down. In this process, some energy loss happens.
Unauthorized power draw. People are stealing electricity, taking connections without meters. These leakages are happening on a massive scale.
Third reason, Pete, mismatch of demand and supply. Friends, electricity cannot be stored. If you generate power but don't dispatch it immediately, it goes to waste. In India, matching demand and supply efficiently is not happening even today.
Friends, now let's talk about the second major problem, the coal output problem. Look friends, India is the world's fifth largest coal producer. Yet our coal production has been stuck for decades. Coal India, which is a government monopoly, increased its output by only 2% in an entire decade. Just 2%. But the demand was increasing by 7 to 8% every year. Imagine this, Lee. The demand is increasing by 7 to 8%, but the supply is increasing by only 2%.
This mismatch between demand and supply created huge pressure on power generation. Power plants were running below capacity.
The risk of blackouts started increasing across the country. In many regions, electricity cuts became a daily routine and drive. Industries faced production losses, students struggled to study at night, and hospitals relied heavily on backup generators.
The energy shortage was hurting every part of life, going from the purest villages to the biggest cities.
India needed an urgent solution to balance demand and supply. And that's when the government began boosting coal imports.
And reviving stalled power projects became essential to meet the growing demand. But bureaucratic delays and slow project approvals kept the production stagnant.
Another reason, Samyam, judicial approvals. For coal mining, environmental clearance and local approvals take years.
Third reason, local public opposition. In many regions, people protest against coal mining.
Because of all this, coal output remained stagnant, and India had to rely on costly imports. This became a big challenge for the power sector.
Now friends, let's talk about the third major problem, grid infrastructure challenges.
India's national grid is robust. It connects states and enables power flow. But this grid has become outdated. Why? Because it was built on an old thesis way that power would be generated at one place and simply transported to consumers, one direction. But today's scenario is completely different. Today, every household and every company can become a potential power producer.
Install solar panels, generate electricity, and sell excess power back to the grid. This is the prosumer model, producer plus consumer.
This means the grid now needs to handle two-way communication, collecting power as well as distributing it. But our current grid system isn't properly set up for this yet.
Upgrade the grid, a crisis may arise.
But our current grid system isn't properly set up for this yet.
Why is it rising? First, air conditioning. Every household is installing ACs, and in summers, the demand skyrockets. Breakers. Second, electric vehicles. The EV revolution is coming. Every EV needs charging, which means more electricity demand.
Third, large airports and data centers. These consume massive amounts of electricity. Fourth, artificial intelligence and data processing. AI servers need huge energy to operate. Because of all this, the grid is under continuous strain. And if the infrastructure isn't modernized, blackouts and power cuts will keep happening.
Friends, now let's talk about what the real impact of this is. Historical inefficiencies, meaning the coal output problem,
have been compounded by systemic losses, meaning T&D losses. On top of that, modernizing
grid has become another challenge. The result? Millions of Indians still live in darkness. Industries face power cuts. Manufacturing The government claimed 100% electrification. But the ground reality is very different. Having a connection and having reliable electricity, these are two very different things. Like stereotype. And until these three fundamental problems are solved, T&D losses, coal output, and grid modernization remain widespread.
then India's power crisis will continue. These issues are deeply execution. They need long-term structural reform. Without addressing them, reliable electricity for all will remain just a dream. India won't, the world's third largest electricity consumer. You've definitely heard this fact. How does electricity actually travel from coal mines to your home? Very few people truly understand this journey. Today, I am going to break down the entire electricity supply chain game for you, from generation to transmission. The complete flow goes like this. First, Coal India extracts coal, then comes power generation at thermal plants, next is power transmission through
distribution to smart meters, and India's energy future. So friends, what exactly is the electricity supply chain?
Electricity supply chain is the complete journey that shows how power is delivered from its initial production source to end consumers. Second, next is power transmission through the grid. Then power distribution by consumers through various channels including traders. Now you might ask, why should I care about this? Because friends, understanding this chain helps us see where India's energy problems lie and how it affects your electricity bills, power cuts, and India's entire economic growth. Let's start with generation. This is basically the manufacturing unit of electricity. Traditionally, the process starts with Coal India extracting coal from mines and transporting it to thermal power plants, then produce energy. Simple, right? But wait, there's a massive problem. India faced a serious crisis because coal output was completely stagnant. As fifth largest coal producer globally, our government monopoly coal increased output by more than 2% for an entire decade. Meanwhile, energy demand was growing at 7 to 8% annually. What happened? Had to import expensive coal from other countries, leading to much higher costs for friends. Now the game is changing. The industry is seeing a revolutionary shift. Every household or company can become a producer of power using solar. Once electricity is generated, it needs to travel from the source to your home. This is where transmission comes in. Up the power voltage to minimize losses and moves it from generation sources to demand areas across the country. It happens through massive transmission lines and grid infrastructure set up by Power Grid of India and other. Now, we are going to talk about national grid issue. Here's something impressive. India has made significant investments to build a national grid. States with power surpluses to transport electricity to states with deficits. Brilliant strategy. While our infrastructure is actually better than Europe or the US in many aspects, desperately need upgrades. Why? To reduce what we call T&D losses, transmission and distribution. Another critical issue. The original grid was designed for one-way flow of power from a central power plant to. Now, with solar panels on rooftops, power is being generated at the consumer. This requires two-way communication in the grid, which our current system wasn't built for. Modernization urgently. After transmission comes distribution. This is the last mile of the electricity. Distribution companies or Discoms are responsible for distributing power to every single consumer. They measure how much you've consumed, bill you accordingly, and then handle collect. Now here's a shocking fact. 95% of Discoms in India are government-owned.
Historically, these Discoms have been plagued by massive losses, often amounting to thousands of.
Talk about this in detail in another session, but it's primarily due to something called T&D losses, and consumers can purchase power either from distribution companies or directly from a generating plant.
Like IEX and PXIL. Not many people know about this option.
Friends, let me tell you about India's biggest electricity challenge, T&D losses or term distribution. However, I have already discussed previous about T&D loss.
Prepare to be shocked. India suffers almost 15% to 16% T&D loss.
Now compare this with China's 2% losses. Massive difference, right?
This leakage makes it extremely difficult for the entire ecosystem to make a profit.
Generate electricity. Transmission companies move it, but 15-16% just
Friends, these energy losses are estimated to be 2% of India's entire GDP. To reduce these losses, we could add 2% directly to our GDP. That's so, friends, what's the solution to this massive problem?
The answer is modernization of the grid using smart meters. What are smart meters? Smart meters are digital devices that efficiently measure consumption in real time and identify leakages instantly and enable utilities to pinpoint and plug losses immediately.
Smart meters Discoms can get accurate consumption data, detect electricity theft in billing errors, enable two-way communication for solar integration.
Now, this significantly reduce T&D losses.
This is crucial for solving both the data collection problem and the T&D loss problem.
The government is now aggressively pushing smart meter installation across India. Modernization is essential for our energy future, especially as we integrate more renewable energy.
So friends, this was today's complete breakdown of India's electricity.
Started from Coal India's mines, traveled through thermal power plants for generating,
Moved across the national grid through transmission lines, reached your neighborhood through distribution, and understood the critical problem of T&D losses and the smart meter solution. India is transitioning from a traditional one-way power model to a modern two-way system where
consumer and producer. Our biggest challenge is reducing those 15 to 16% T&D loss.
Understanding this supply chain helps you understand your electricity bill,
Power infrastructure, and India's energy security.
That's all for today's informational video. But it's not the end of video.
Till then, Jai Hind, Jai Bharat. In next session, we are going to discuss why India's Discoms.